Welcome to another episode of the Change Agent Podcast, where we are exploring topics related to leadership, management, technology, and so much more. Our goal is to provide insights, stories, and tips to help you achieve your goals, improve performance, and make your organization stand out and start delivering value. I hope you're looking forward to another very informative session, so let's get right to it. Welcome back and welcome to episode 15. Our topic today is centered on managing through a crisis. I'm Eric, and today we want to talk about how to manage projects through a crisis using a foundational practice called the 72-hour rule. But before we get started, I want to do a bit of housekeeping. So it was my intent that each session or each season would be about 15 episodes. And this one being the 15th, I want to consider this the last one of season one, where we're really focused on those things that are characteristic of good leadership, developing and implementing strong leadership mindsets, and the soft skills of project management and leadership. In season two, though, I want to expect that we want to move into practical applications of project management and leadership. And exciting news, I want to be able to introduce interviews of some of the most impactful leaders that I've been able to grow with and know over the last number of years, 20 or 30 or so. So stay tuned to those podcasts so that you can hear those interviews. Make sure that you subscribe and share, because you're not going to want to miss these, and you don't want to hog all these cool episodes from your friends. So let's get on to the show. Now, before we dive into the aspects of what the 72-hour rule is, let's talk about another word that's probably more important right now: crisis. What is it? What is a crisis? Is it really a crisis? Is it a crisis only to you? Was it one that someone else created for you? Or is it a technical issue that's created the crisis? Maybe it was a response to one of the enterprise environmental factors, or EEFs, that we have, which we discussed in other episodes, such as those things which are not under the direct control of the project manager or the team. These are things like weather, political environments, policy, and so forth. So they're not things that you control, they're your EEFs. The key point in this is that we want to make sure that it's not us creating the crisis. So you really need to assess if the issue you have or preceding risk has not been blown out of proportion by you from your thoughts alone. The idle mind is a devil's workshop, and we tend to assume the worst generally when we're project managers and things are kind of going along, and then all of a sudden happens. We have to assume the worst in some cases, right? I mean, there are PMs that have a glass half full, and that's all great, but we don't want a project to fail. So please be objective in assessing the facts from the challenge that could be making a mountain out of a molehill. You don't want to take something and just blow it out of proportion. So let's assume right off the bat that it's not you. Great. We have something much less complex to work with now. So now let's explore that 72-hour rule. So the concept between the 72-hour rule is simply that it's a rule that implies that your first 72 hours are your most critical time to employ a response to a crisis and get it resolved. The most important part about this is that it is not the time for deliberate response planning. It's not time to do that. You should have already had a plan to these crises. You should have already had a plan to these challenges and obstacles. Managing when things are going really well is one thing, but managing when a disaster is on the horizon is a totally different ballgame. Michael Hopf said, and I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, he said that hard times create strong leaders. Strong leaders create good times. Good times create weak leaders. Weak leaders create hard times. And the cycle just keeps repeating. So in mission critical projects, regardless of which field you're in, the 72 hours right as a crisis happens determines whether or not a project will succeed or spiral into failure when it kicks off. So it's important that we have all of our plans in place, and the subsequent content in this podcast is really what the focus is on, getting prepared to actively and successfully respond within that 72 hours. Now, the 72-hour rule, or some concept of that framework, is employed by leaders in intelligence, military and defense, first responders, and all those types of people, right? Where we have to respond to a crisis quickly. What can we learn from those high pressure fields? What tools do they use? What concepts do they use? What frame of mind do they have? How can we apply their techniques to everyday project management? So let's check it out and get into those ideas in some more detail. Now, again, as I mentioned, the 72-hour rule is that crucial window in which decisions and actions set the course to implementing the response to a crisis. It's often seen in crisis management, military ops, emergency response, and rapid mobilization, where immediate action is necessary, and successful action. So, for example, in cybersecurity, if a company gets hit by a major data breach, they must identify the breach, secure their systems, communicate to the stakeholders, all within 72 hours to prevent irreversible damage. So, looking at other industries and organizations that use tools that are similar to the 72-hour rule, we can find some evident implications on how to do these things, how these individuals and organizations do that. So, I mentioned before military and intelligence operations. They often use a tool called the OODA Loop. It's spelled OODA, and that means observe, orient, decide, and then act. And this is a framework for rapid decision making in combat intelligence operations. Now, special operations teams use similar frameworks to this to plan and execute missions under extreme time constraints. And it's really important. Obviously, many people think of special operations teams as super efficient, effective, operating under high stress. And so they've obviously got to have frameworks to use. Now, the key to the framework of the OODA loop is that you have to be really good at it. You have to be faster at processing this than your threat is at moving if you're going to be successful. There are a plethora of ways to improve the speed at which you can implement and conduct the OODA loop, and we don't have time to go into the details about that now, but you can take it upon yourself to investigate the framework and see if it's for you, how you can automate parts of it, discard what you don't need, and customize it until you get the efficiency that you're looking for. Now, another one is the disaster response teams. Anything that has to do with disaster response, and the first thing that comes to my mind generally is FEMA and emergency services. So FEMA and the emergency services across the nation have structured protocols to deploy resources and establish the communications, provide aid within 72 hours of a disaster. Now, key aspects that enable that and make it fast and furious include things like they have a great depth of knowledge of disaster operations and the agencies that participate in the response to those disasters. They have a detailed plan that they've done, which came as a result of intensive scenario operations. And they also had cultivated relationships that allow them to have speed of communication, removing delays, management of expectations, and resource deployment. And of course, as I mentioned before, cybersecurity is one. Now, if a company doesn't act quickly, they definitely risk data loss, reputational damage, financial penalties, you name it. And the criticality of those responses are most impactful on the people that rely on them, their customers. And since this is a focus in today's digital world, being cyber ready and secure is really, really one of those things you have to be ready at. And you have to have that response plan in place. Now, while these real world examples demonstrate that some of the most professional and critical organizations use the framework to expedite decision making and action, we need to examine the framework in the world of project management, because understanding how the outside organizations use them is one thing, but we need to find a way to connect it to our project management technique. Now, in project management, especially in time sensitive environments, we need a tool that can help us make sound, actionable, and fast decisions. So let's employ some of those things that we talked about, like the OODA loop and so forth, and some others that I haven't mentioned, into a project management role. So using frameworks like the OODA loop and SWOT, which is SWOT, that stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Analysis for rapid yet informed decisions comes quickly. Now, the OODA loop, the idea of this is to recognize the crisis and its characteristics and understand what's happening. You're in the OODA loop, you're looking for the what. This is the orient part, right? And then you prepare and orient your teams to prepare for actions based on possible courses of actions that you've set when you've planned and set them into motion. Key points on this are that you have to keep it as simple as possible. You want to avoid unnecessary actions and limit the course of actions development and participating experts. You don't, you want to limit the courses of actions to participating experts. You don't want to have the good idea fairy running rampant around when you're trying to develop an OODA loop. SWOT, the SWOT part, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, is a framework that's best used in deliberate planning. Now, deliberate planning is detailed, it takes time, it's not hasty, which is um, you just respond without any prior planning. So, what you want to do when you do the SWOT is you want to capture and document your team's strengths, weaknesses, and what opportunities exist in the future, and of course, the threats part of that. But again, you want to gather your experts, all your technical, project management, historical documents, lessons learned, and you want to look at what your strengths are. You want to understand your competition. So those are your weaknesses. You want to look at opportunities. This could be your customer, what things are coming up on the horizon for opportunities. Or it could be a, a competitor failed in a certain area, and that's your opportunity to engage the customer and make yourself look better and do better than your competition is. And then, of course, what threats there are. Maybe you have a competitor that's really knocking it out of the park, or maybe you have a funding crisis coming along, a continuing resolution is coming up. Another tool that you can use is you can employ agile methodologies in a crisis setting. Now, using agile practices in crisis responses can certainly help you drive efficiencies in response. Agile teams implement tools like the Team Sync, which used to be called the Daily Stand Up, which is short. It's a short daily meeting that you have to emphasize what's going on with the team members, what their plans are for the day, and what obstacles are in play that need to be removed, which is your job. Now, in crisis management, we can think of these as response team meetings. However, these need to be more frequent than once a day. In a real crisis, you might have these every hour. So consider and implement those actions to suit your needs. There's actually a really good article on this topic that I just recently read, focused on disaster and crisis management from a contributor named Sophia Kluwer. Now, you can find this article on LinkedIn. It's called Scrum in the Storm, How Agile Tools Can Strengthen Crisis Management. And maybe we'll get her on the show one day. Who knows? And maybe she can talk about these in detail. But go back to LinkedIn, check it out, and see if you can find that. It's called Scrum in the Storm by Sophia Kluwer. Now, another tool we can use is we can use rapid team mobilization and communication. So once you establish the clear roles for the team and groups within the team, minimizing bureaucratic delays from outside of your functional managers and ensuring all the team members have a single source of truth, and that could be simply you. It's critical to streamlining operations and achieving those execution excellence that you're trying to get when you do response. You don't have time for delays. Don't have various streams of information. One of the biggest killers in the response plan for a project team is having multiple sources of information where somebody's starting to compare one bit of information to another. We can't have that. Choose reliable, expert, and primary sources. These could be your sponsors, prime stakeholders, other project managers, executive leadership if you have to, or as long as it's firsthand accounts. So try to minimize multiple streams of information. So now that we've explored some of the ideas that we could use to engage the crisis, we need to be prepared. Now, Benjamin Franklin said, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. So let's look at some strategies that we can use to prepare then. So first, we want to have some predefined contingency plans. These could look at we could call these playbooks for crisis scenarios. This could entail using red teams, wargaming, or you could just develop an intricate training plan that can also include your change management teams. So having all this expert knowledge and support from within and outside of your organization to develop possible risks, how you're going to rank them, the response plans to those, and verification and validation of those response plans is really critical. You could use crisis communication strategies. So setting up your communications channel, you will have, as a project manager, or at least you should have, a communications plan. So setting up that communication channel and documenting it in the communications plan is really important because that helps eliminate bottlenecks that can be developed. And then those can be integrated into your stakeholder management plan. Now, understanding who to contact when testing, and how to test out these theories and testing those lines of communication often is really important. And this is going to give you the best preparation for a response when you need it. So if you don't have communication plans, if you don't have stakeholder management plans or stakeholder engagement plans, just for simplicity, these are just ideas that you could jot down on a piece of paper. You can make them in an email. You can create a document. You can create a full-blown plan, and there are templates everywhere you can do that. Just how do you respond to things? Who do you respond to in which situation? Now, the last thing I want to mention here is you can leverage technology. This is probably one of the most important ones, just because that's how we deliver communications nowadays. We don't use pigeons anymore. So let's talk about leveraging technology. Now, you can use AI-driven risk assessments, dashboards, emergency response systems. They're all great ideas for integrating technology into crisis management. And while I think that they're really cool, they're also complex. It takes time to build, it takes time to deploy, it takes time to understand them, and people have to have access to them. You can think of dashboards as like your frontline information delivery mechanism for the team and leadership, and they're all great. But you can use something as simple as quick steps in Microsoft Outlook. So when you go into Outlook at the top of the toolbar, when you're creating your message, there's a little thing there called quick steps. You can search for it if you can't find it. And that simply allows you to build predefined templates for specific situations where you just click on one button and an email is generated with all of the things that you need, the core part of it, and then you're going to put in the meat, right? You're going to put in all of the variables. And this will save you so much time as it automates and generating emails using templates and streamlining the communication workflow. So now let's look at some summary thoughts on decision making and planning, because I think it's really important that we understand where these all get applied and what we can do to make this happen, to make this successful in responding through the 72-hour rule to a crisis. So urgency-driven decision-making absolutely matters, especially and even so in non-crisis projects. So get used to operating under pressure so that you're prepared. The military trains as it fights. So that it makes sure that its personnel at all levels are always ready, that they understand what their roles are from the top rank to the lowest rank, and that the organizational objective is also known. The commander's intent is known. They know what their strengths are. They know what their weaknesses are. They know what opportunities exist to improve those, and that they know what threats they have. So they use the SWOT oftentimes to train as they fight, so they're always ready. The other thing you can do is you can simulate high pressure scenarios in businesses in order to prepare your team for response. And these could be simulations. These could be red teaming. You could have war gaming. And what your goal here is to try and identify possible risks and get those integrated into your risk management plan, where they are identified and assessed and make sure that they're managed so that your response remains realistic, it remains actionable, and that your resources are appropriately assigned. The next thing you can do is apply that 72-hour mindset. This is the core part of it. This will help you accelerate problem solving, especially in the corporate environment and tech environments. So for your response plans, plan your operations to respond to this under 72 hours and see where you are when training and you performing your assessments based on your scenario responses to your response plans. Now, you're really looking to find ways to gain efficiencies, remove the extraneous actions that you're doing, and you document them and get them into your risk management plan so that you can mitigate them and respond to your risks and get issues resolved as soon as possible. So it's obvious that the 72 hours in the beginning matter. You must have excellent planning that enables rapid mobilization and have effective and efficient communications lines open. And you want to make sure you're testing these on a regular basis. So I have a challenge for you listeners out there. Let's think about a project where you were recently presented with a serious crisis or a complex challenge that threatened the outcome of your project. How would you have handled that if you only had 72 hours to deal with it? So think about it. Maybe drop me a note somewhere and either in a review of the podcast, or you can go on and to Buzzsprout and find us there and leave some fan mail, if you will. Let me know how you did it. So it's really important that we implement 72-hour rule, or at least we constrain our response to 72 hours, which will help us drive really effective response plans to a problem and to a crisis. And again, it goes back to the very beginning of the episode. Is this crisis real? Is it developed by you? Are you the one creating this? Don't blow things out of proportion. When something happens, quickly assess it, understand the facts, get the facts, not assumptions. Document what your assumptions are so that you know them, but don't don't act on them, and then start building your plans using some of the tools that we've had here. So that's it for the episode. If you do find it helpful, please subscribe to the podcast and make sure that you leave a review, share the show with your colleagues and your friends, and provide us some recommendations on how we can improve on this and maybe some topics you'd like us to talk about. If you'd like more information on how to engage with me directly, you can head right over to kalinavision.com. That's KALYN as in Nancy, A-vision.com, and catch us on YouTube at Beyond the Glare or your favorite podcast platform to learn more and see how we can help you and your team get to the next level. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time.